Disclaimer, this video contains my opinion. Today I'm going to be doing a little bit of review for Seven Deadly Sins, which I watched a really long time ago. Seven Deadly Sins is sort of like a fantasy adventure type anime with magic in it. And the first part of the show is about reuniting the Seven Deadly Sins to save the land or whatever. I think the one thing that people distinctly remember about Seven Deadly Sins is its animation, but I'm not going to talk about that yet. I think that the characters in the show do have pretty good personalities that stay decently consistent, but sometimes you have absolutely no idea what one character is going to do because they purposefully leave some of the characters in mystery for later plot points, and you kind of just never know what's going to happen. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. One of my major issues with a lot of shows is when it's super fan servicey, and especially with Seven Deadly Sins, there are some parts that are kind of creepy, but the fan servicey stuff never got quite as bad as something like Fire Force did. It's not quite that intrusive, although that's not a very high bar to reach. I think most of the problems stem from some of the characters that aren't human being like thousands of years older. Like you have like the 1,000-year-old lollies and stuff. I don't know. It just seems pretty typical anime for me, but I totally understand if you don't want to watch it because of the lollies. I don't blame you. I think the story itself can range to pretty like concise and on the right track to completely all over the place, so I don't really know what to say about it. Seven Deadly Sins is a show that sort of started off going up and then slowly started going down, and by the time you get to the final season, it's just like, wow, some mistakes were made. Another thing is I think the opening themes are really good, so I thought I'd mention that. It's also got some pretty good fights, but for me, unless the fights are very character or plot relevant, I don't really care about them, which is just my own personal opinion. I know some people only watch anime for the fights and the animation. That's not me. If you like that, maybe you like this show more than me. I never hated Seven Deadly Sins at all. I never thought about when I'm watching the show, oh, I want to quit watching this, it's so bad. I never thought that. I thought that watching quite a few shows, but never Seven Deadly Sins. It's just noticeable that it goes downhill, but the plot never got bad enough for me to be like, oh, I'm going to stop watching this. I was just kind of like, just seems like a typical show. The longer it goes on, usually the worse it gets. I also don't really know how to feel about the whole last part. After the main issue was resolved, there was a whole extra part at the end, which is probably an important plot point more in the manga, but in the anime it just felt like it was just tacked on and I don't really know why it was there. Yes, it was part of like Merlin's character, but it just sort of felt like because it wasn't relevant for the whole series and it's just tacked on at the end. It probably was smoother in the manga than in the anime, but for me it just sort of felt like the show should have ended before it got to the last part. I was like, it just felt like an extra at that point. It's like, why is this even happening? The last part wasn't bad, and I do like Arthur. It just felt like a little out of place after everything that just happened, but maybe that's just me. And finally, the thing that people seem to remember the most about the series is the less than stellar animation. Seven Deadly Sins started off pretty good with animation, and throughout the seasons it just got worse and worse and worse. And I never read the manga, but I heard manga readers just absolutely up in arms over the fact that some of the fights in the last part of the series were so bad in comparison to the manga, and they said that those fights were so amazing in the manga, and just see them translated so poorly just almost brought them to tears. I mean, the animation was not good. As someone who really doesn't see a difference between most animation, I respect the work that the people who made the animation, like the work that went into it, but for me, I don't really see that much of a dramatic difference. Maybe I'm just blind to it. I'm just thinking about the characters in the story more than the animation. Some people that's not the case, but for me it is. But for Seven Deadly Sins, if I look at a clip from like the first season versus the last season, I'm over here just like, these poor manga readers, I feel so bad. I don't even think the last part of the show was that bad. It's just that if you look at the character models and the movements in some of the later battles too closely, basically if you look at them at all, it's just people are melting and it's just like still frames moving across the screen. It looks, in comparison to the first season, it looks pretty bad. And that's what most people remember about Seven Deadly Sins, is how the animation just tanked. Which sort of sucks, because that's not all what the series was. It wasn't just a collage of bad animation. The first part wasn't even that bad. I mean, I definitely don't think it was a perfect series. Overall, I think the series had a lot of problems, but the animation being the thing that the series is remembered for is kind of an oof. Overall, I think that my opinions on the show are kind of mixed on whether I would recommend it or not. There's just so many parts of it, it's just like weird or awkward. Overall, I don't really know if I recommend it. There'd be a certain group of people you'd recommend this show to. If you like fantasy and magic, you're okay with fan service and you don't mind the bad animation at the end, then I think that you could watch it without a problem. But if the only reason you're in it is for animation, or you just can't stand fan service, don't watch it. It's not going to fulfill you. But if there's one reason why I would recommend Seven Deadly Sins, would probably just be Escanor. Now, I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to spoil any of his majesty. But he is by far the best character in the series, and I don't think really many people contest that. He is amazing. His introduction was great. He was a great character throughout. Normally I wouldn't like a character with his personality, but he just makes it work. The truest definition of a Giga Chad. Anyway, I'd probably give Seven Deadly Sins like a 6.5 or 7 out of 10. You know, points taken off for the lollies, creepiness, fan service, animation, and other plot-related issues. That's it. See ya.